Ahoy, everybody. Yes, indeed, we are here for Outlook. And I was thinking, yes, that's definitely me turning up here for Outlook, but this word Outlook, lookout, what does lookout mean? And so I went looking in the dictionary, and to my surprise, I found out that firstly, it's a place where you keep an eye on things. Sometimes a fortified redoubt, sometimes not. And then secondly, it has another meaning more in the common language of your guess about the future, whether something will come true or not. So if the earth is flat, unicorns are real, and wind turbines at sea kill whales, then the outcome could be good or bad, depending. So that means a mixture of two things: the real facts, and then also how you interpret them with the confidence that you have in your brain. Luckily, people have done research on this. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it has two axes. At the bottom over here, you can see knowledge, and up there you can see confidence. And as you would expect, it's all perfectly rational. Over here, if you've got no knowledge, you've got no confidence. Then it gets weird. You get a tiny bit of knowledge, and your confidence goes through the roof. I'm an expert on this because I know somebody did a YouTube video on it or something like that, and you think you know everything. Then as you learn more, gradually you go down into the valley of despair and then pop out the other side thinking, I think I might have a rational point of view on this. And this is sort of a lead into my talk on the mixture between confidence and knowledge, and also climate change. So we've got a little video for you coming up. The words are a bit hard to understand. So the first words are ugly, ugly windmills.
Ugly, ugly windmills. And the worst part is they won't even work. One problem with these windmills in the sea is that laying the cabling for them is very, very difficult because the currents keep shifting them around. These are basic technical questions that have not yet been worked out, and that is what...
And as our hero says, these are basic technical questions that have not yet been worked out. And he would be 100% correct, because he's confident, he'd be 100% correct if he'd been saying those words in 1839. Because in 1840 we solved that problem, and then later we managed to get the electric telegraph with the cable all the way to Australia, and now we're in the situation where something like over 99.99% of all communications that we humans do, including AIs and the banks and everybody else, travels via these cables, and they actually work practically all the time, 1.5 million kilometres of them. And with regard to the offshore turbines, we started them in 1991, and just recently the very first set have been licensed as safe to run for another 30 years. And by the way, the energy payback time on wind turbines, whether it's sea on land, is 6 months. And in the UK, they've got one wind turbine bank that by itself accounts for about 3% or 4% of all of Australia's electrical generating capacity if everything was switched on at the same time. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm travelling away from the family, I get so heartbroken in the hotel room, I have to turn on Sky TV for brief entertainment. After a few moments, I'm lifted out of my torpor, I start throwing things at the TV, and I have to stop watching it. So I think that our colleague, in general, most of the people on Sky TV are a mixture of the Dunning-Kruger effect and the village idiot. Which is awfully unkind of me, because after all, in my earlier years here at the Steelworks, I did spend some time as a part-time Jesus figure. So let me give you the very simple solution to climate change, which is we just keep fossil carbon in the ground. 6 words. We use it mainly for energy, but we also use it for plastics and for agriculture. And for each of those applications, we have alternatives either now or coming up in the future if we put our minds to it. So on one hand, I actually love the cling wrap around the fruit and veggies that, when you bring it back from the supermarket, because it reduces wastage by 30%. But on the other hand, I hate it because it's made of plastics which do not degrade, and the alternative already exists, which is to make cling wrap out of soybean waste. Okay, a bit of history. Way back in 1973, having centuries of weather and climate records and insurance payouts, the world's biggest reinsurance company started charging more in certain areas because of what they call the greenhouse effect. Today we call it climate change, and all the other insurance companies followed beginning in 1973. Big fossil fuel, the chief scientist for the world's biggest fossil fuel company, said 3 years later, we are influencing the climate through greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. Here's something weird you didn't know, in most cases. The world's best science on climate change was done by the fossil fuel companies from 1977 to 1990. And then they chucked a UE and started lying about it. But in 1982, they had this meeting, and here's a photograph from that meeting on the 12th of November 1982. And you've got a graph on the right-hand side. And if you look down at the lower left-hand side, it's got that they predicted, following BAU, business as usual, that by the year 2020, carbon dioxide levels would be that number, and air temperature would be that number. And they were right on both of them 38 years before. Let's have a look at the carbon dioxide climbing as it goes up. So we're beginning in 1980, and that's, 1880, my bad. And here we go, rolling around. It's bouncing around a bit. Carbon dioxide is being emitted, but then also there's pollution. There's the First World War, then a bit of a downturn, then the Second World War kicks in, lots of pollution. And then we have the Clean Air Act coming in 1960, so it oscillates around. And then around 1990, it goes red. And you'll see it goes red really, really fast, expanding out rapidly. And you think that went rapidly. Then you turn on its side and you think, oh my God, it did go fast. Up to where it was red, we put half the carbon dioxide that we've added into the atmosphere over the last 2 centuries. Above the red, the other half in just a little while. Thank you, fossil fuel companies. Bit of background knowledge. Secondly, the heat of global warming does not come from burning the actual fossil fuels. It comes from the sun. It's trapped sunlight. The sun emits heat at about 5,500 degrees temperature. It hits, and at that temperature, the greenhouse gas molecules do not interact with it, they don't see with it. It hits the ground, warms up to 15 degrees. It then comes up, and at that temperature, it's absorbed by the greenhouse gas molecules. If it all went into space, there'd be no such thing as global warming. But half of it goes into space, and the other half comes down to the ground, and it is then we have the situation where carbon dioxide is acting like a one-way valve, trapping 600,000 Hiroshima bombs of heat every day. Why do we burn fossil fuels? Because they have got military industrial amounts of energy. Consider one source of energy, a human labourer. 50,000 a year. I want you to take bricks from here to there. You have to burn up a certain amount of energy to do it. Second source of energy, a barrel of oil, 159 litres, or 200 kilograms of coal. Same amount of energy. The amount of energy in a barrel of oil is equal to the energy that a human can put out, not in a day or a week, but 10 years. $500,000 versus $100. It's a bargain. And even better, all that energy is concentrated in one spot. So you can make a ship go out and catch fish, and then you can haul the fish in. The effects: 1/5 of all the trees on the east coast of Australia burnt in those big fires when our Prime Minister was holidaying in Hawaii. And that then set up the Triple La Nina. The Triple La Nina was set off by those bushfires. There's a paper in Nature talking about that. Sydney briefly became the hottest place on planet Earth. We actually tipped the Earth a tiny amount off its axis, and also we changed the rate of the spin of the Earth. Us little humans. We did that to something 12,500 kilometres across. Now the big thing, how do we fix it? And the answer is cubic money. And who deals in money? The International Monetary Fund. And in 2013, they put out a paper dealing with the previous 6 years. And the paper was called Energy Subsidy Reform. So energy is energy. Reform, that means change. Subsidy. For those of you who do not have an education in economics, like me, I had to look it up. What is subsidy? Well, an investment is when you say, hey, Karl, lend me $100, I'll give you 5%. You make some money out of it. I'm very happy. You're happy. We've both made money. I made $5. You made $45. That's an investment. A subsidy is you say, look, Karl, at schoolies, I need $100 worth of goon, a cubic metre at least. Give me $100. I give it to you. That's a subsidy. That's what we're doing with the fossil fuel companies. We do not accept the money back. So in 2013, the amount of money given by all of the countries of the world put together was 4% of the world's GDP. In the year 2019, they had another paper looking at the previous 6 years. Look it up, IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the amount of money given to fossil fuel companies was 5%. And you're thinking, but subsidies are good sometimes. I mean, you don't say, as a parent, look, Jacinta, we love you very much. You're a terrific daughter. You're terrific everywhere. You empty the dishwasher, you load the dishwasher, you put the garbage out, you make your own bed, you make us tea in bed. But you're revenue negative, baby. You've just cost us money. In a big picture, for both her and the Australian government, both will benefit if that person gets an education in various fields. But in the short term, it's cheaper just to not educate her and shove her down a coal mine. So subsidies can have benefits. So the big question is, were there benefits? According to the big, heavy boss, the International Monetary Fund, were there benefits of paying 4 and 5% of the world's GDP to the fossil fuel companies? Did it improve negative growth? Yes, it did something to economic growth. For 12 years, it dropped it. And it was bad for the environment and society and health. This time around, the latest paper, 7% of the subsidies. Does Australia give subsidies? Oh, hang on, baby. Yes, we do. Burning stuff causes deaths. 10% of all the people who die each year die because of breathing polluted air, even in Australia. And these subsidies, they're currently 7% of the world GDP, a mixture of direct subsidies where we actually give them cubic money, and other sorts of subsidies where you say, oh, you don't want to pay tax? Okay, I don't want to hurt your feelings. And we only need half of the money that we give them to fund our transition into a carbon-free world where we reverse carbon dioxide. We just take the fossil fuel subsidies away, and we spend half on climate change and the other on, I don't know, unicorn parties, education, health, welfare, useless things like that. You want some more information? International? Go to drawdown.org. Drawdown.org, download this lovely document, and they talk about things like reducing what we put into the air, increasing the sinks will lead to a better world. For the Australian point of view, go to BZE, beyondzeroemissions.org.au, or Zero Carbon Australia. And in their document, they talk about the employment and the costs. And probably most of you believe that the fossil fuel companies, the mining companies, employ a huge number of people. They employ fewer than McDonald's. And you're thinking, well, surely they pay their fair share of tax. Well, let's have a look at this document from the Australian Tax Office for the year 2021, in which year they did, for a change, they did pay tax. They did pay tax. This is hard to read, so here's the list in bigger font. And you can see they had revenue of 20 billion, 17 billion, and so it goes down, adding up to a total between the couple of dozen fossil fuel companies, a total revenue of $150 billion, 10% of Australia's GDP. They had revenue of $150 billion, and they did pay tax, $30. I'm pretty sure the accountant who made that mistake has been fired. So with regard to big fossil fuel, they lied beginning in 1990 with a budget of $1 billion a year. They changed tack. We don't know why. They lied, and as a result, this is where we are today. But if they had not lied, we would be in a better place with no massive floods, no people dead, no massive dollars cost. We'd be in a better place. So they still did lie, so it's time to just stop them. And it's very simple. Keep fossil carbon in the ground. That just wipes out everything that they've got going for them. So it's very straightforward. We just simply go that pathway. We don't need it for anything. It's a tricky pathway. It's not as though you say, okay, let's fire everybody who works for a coal mine or everybody who sells petrol and suddenly you've got families out of money. No. You've got to have a transition. Luckily, solar panels are going like crazy. They're taking off, and it took us something like 68 years to get the first terawatt of power, another 2 years to get the next terawatt, and pretty well the same to get the third terawatt. That means that we are installing, so we're manufacturing and installing, we the human race, 1 gigawatt of solar panels every 33 hours, which means that we could install Australia's total generating capacity in 137 days. And that's just the solar panels. We've got new manufacturing materials. We've got car paint that will turn sunlight into enough electricity to run your car for 25 kilometres. You just park your car in the sun on an average day through the year, and you'll be able to run 25 kilometres just on the sunlight alone. There's a whole lot that we have to do. The electric batteries are actually a solution. If you look at the energy in an electric battery in a car, it's about 100 kilowatt hours, which will run the car 500 or 100 kilometres or so, or run the average American house for 3 or 4 days. Our place in Sydney, which is super energy efficient, who's got double glazing? Right, double glazing makes such a difference. It'll run it for 15 to 20 days with 2 to 8 people coming in, depends, or an apartment for about 25 days. And so they are a solution. They can store the electricity. Each car battery can run a house for at least a week. Not just a night, a whole week. The grid goes down, you can run your house for a week. And so if the whole grid went down over Australia, we could run Australia for about a week. And you think it's going to cost money? Yes, $20 billion. And on that $150 billion of revenue, the fossil fuel companies paid $30. You, on average, pay 27% tax, right? That would easily cover the $20 billion needed to put charging stations everywhere you park a motor vehicle all across Australia. So we can do cars, we can do electricity in 10 years if we try. Concrete and steel, that's a big one, another 10 years. Transport, aeroplanes and ships, another 5 years on top of that. And agriculture, there's nothing stopping us except political will and half the money that we give to the fossil fuel companies. We do not have to change and adjust and get resilience. Instead, we can just stop it with today's technologies. Thank you very much.